move on, Keith, and we can talk about Newcastle United. Talking of missing out on European football, we know that they did following Manchester United's FA Cup victory. How big of a blow is that for them financially going into the summer transfer window?
It's not that big of a blow financially. I think, if we look at Villa in the same competition last year, then if they got to the final and won it, they might have made maybe 12.5 million. So I don't think it's that big a blow financially, but it's a big blow in terms of the kudos and still being able to say you're a European club and having those European nights. So it is a bit of an impact. I don't think it's the big financial blow that, as I say, that people might have thought, but certainly it does, take away a bit of the glitter and the stardust. The other, the other side of that, of course, is you're not playing Thursday, Sunday, and you're able to focus on the league and the cup to a much greater extent. And so you've really got a chance to get back and go stronger for this season. The squad isn't strained as much. So Newcastle will have to look at that bright side and think they've got a very clear focus on the rest of the season ahead, with the league and the cup and the two cups as their main goals.
How would you rate their season overall, given the injuries they had and some of the struggles they had throughout the season, say with the Champions League game against Paris Saint-Germain that we all know was quite controversial?
Yeah, I thought they were unlucky in the European adventures. I really did. And I think overall in the league, I think they performed very creditably given the injuries they had. Obviously, all teams get injuries, but I do think Newcastle had some pretty severe ones in key places. I think they had a good season overall, and I think they'll come back. As I've said, with the injuries recovered, I think they've got a very strong squad, and I do think they'll manage to keep the majority of their top players, and so they may have a couple of additions. So I expect Newcastle, again, without the European distraction, to perform pretty well in the league and the cup this year.
So, Keith, you don't think there's a chance then players will look to move on, given the no European football for next season? Actually, you suspect that they'll be driven by that lure potentially going into next season of pushing for a top 6, top 4 spot potentially?
Well, I think, if we're looking at the say perhaps the two top players like the Isak and the Guimaraes, of course there's going to be interest in those sort of players, but it's a very strange transfer market that's already developing, that from what I'm hearing from all my sources, it's very, very much a buyer's market. There's a lot of clubs looking over their shoulders at PSR and different things like that. And there's a lot of clubs and a lot of players that may be looking for a move as well, but there are limited buyers. And so that tends to mean depressed prices. And therefore, it's a bit easier for some of the players to keep some of those top names. I think while certainly those two players that I mentioned have got great appeal and could certainly move to other clubs within Europe, I don't know if the market will be there to try and create an auction and to get the sort of price Newcastle would need. I also think those players will see that, with a stable squad next year, there could be a chance of getting back into Champions League contention as well.
So someone like Bruno Guimaraes, say, Keith, that you've mentioned, we know he has that £100 million release clause going into June. Are we expecting it to be activated at all? Is there any chance you think that he could go? Or do you think really that there is actually there's a big likelihood that him and Isak and some other stars could actually stay at the club?
I think at the moment, my feeling is they will probably stay. As I say, I think it's very much a buyer's market. £100 million players, those sort of transactions are going to be very, very rare this summer. It's going to be unusual, but it's going to be a pretty quiet summer for that sort of high level of transaction. Whereas a couple of seasons ago, you'd have seen maybe 3 or 4, 5, 6 players of that sort of level going. So I think it's going to be difficult to achieve those sort of buyouts. Nevertheless, I mean, look, he's a quality player, there's no doubt, and he probably is worth the price tag. But I just don't think there will be a queue of clubs able to spend that sort of money, given the worry about PSR breaches, etc., that are coming up.
We know, Keith, that they're targeting Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the window, albeit, like you've said, they may not be likely to spend. From a financial point of view, what's his valuation? And actually, is he the sort of player, do you think, in years to come, whether it is this summer or next summer potentially, that is that the sort of striker they should be looking to target to sign up for St James's Park?
I think he'd be a perfect Newcastle number 9, to be honest. I think he leads the line very well. He's got an eye for goal. When he's fit, he's fantastic. I think he is, he'll resume his England place, I think, pretty quickly. So I think, yes, there's 1 year left on his contract, which is why the numbers that have been associated with him around about 25 million make some sort of sense for both clubs. So I think Dominic may consider the move. I think Newcastle would be very pleased. I think the fans would be very pleased when they get him, if they get him. Now, does that European lack of qualification, even that 12.5 million, make a difference in terms of Newcastle being able to spend? That's what we've got to see. Whether that has actually slowed down that transaction. It was certainly very hot and talked about it just a couple of weeks ago, but it's gone very quiet. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I think he is in the mould of the great Newcastle number 9s. I'd hate to see him go from Everton. And I certainly hope he stays and there's a new deal to be put forward. But again, Everton have got their own constraints about offering him the new deal that he might want. And so it may be the best thing for both parties if he has to move on. I'll be sad to see him go.
They're also set to go head-to-head potentially with Liverpool for Burnley goalkeeper James Trafford. Would he be a good number 2 potentially to Nick Pope? And actually, do you think Eddie Howe might be weighing up that sort of Arsenal dilemma they have at the moment with the number 1s with both Raya and Ramsdale? Is that something that, do you think Eddie Howe might be considering?
It seems to be. And of course, Trafford's a bit younger, whereas we had the Ramsdale-Raya sort of situation when they were both round about the same sort of age and there wasn't really an obvious junior. This case, I think Trafford would be the obvious junior. I think Trafford, I know I'm unsure about, he's obviously technically a good keeper, but there have been some issues towards the end of the season. Obviously, Eddie Howe and the powers that be there, as whoever's the sporting director at the moment, whoever's handling those issues, feels that he's the right choice. I think it's going to be a difficult one. And I think when there's tension between goalkeepers, as we've seen at Arsenal, it isn't the healthiest situation. I think you can have a good fit of your your backup keeper and still, get on personality-wise, etc. Those are key things that you've got to consider in terms of the squad happiness and the squad cohesiveness. And we did see with the Arsenal situation a lot of negative publicity around it and a lot of pressure on the squad and the defence because, the keeper has to communicate with the defence so much and it has to be a solid unit together. And if there is that little bit of niggle, then, it's not a healthy situation in terms of the back unit.